The impeachment inquiry into the president has spiraled into a duel between House Democrats and a Trump administration that refuses to cooperate. Earlier this month, White House counsel Pat Cipollone made it pretty clear. He wrote, "In order to fulfill his duties to the American people, the Constitution, the executive branch, and all future occupants of the office of the presidency, President Trump and his administration cannot participate in your partisan and unconstitutional inquiry under these circumstances."
Well, we're fighting all the subpoenas.
We know that the White House, Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Trump's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani, who holds no official position in the administration, have all been subpoenaed. So what happens next to those in Trump's orbit who refuse to comply with those subpoenas? I called Dr. Matthew Wilson, an associate professor of politics at Southern Methodist University.
Congress does not have the authority to act as a law enforcement agency. That's not its job.
The Trump administration's outright refusal to cooperate is not testing Congress's power to issue subpoenas, but Congress's power to enforce them. But let's take a step back. 3 presidents besides Trump have been subpoenaed in the past: Thomas Jefferson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton. Thomas Jefferson initially refused to comply, but then produced some documents and then offered to testify. Richard Nixon resigned, and Clinton's subpoena was withdrawn after he voluntarily agreed to testify. Here's Keith Whittington, a constitutional law professor at Princeton University.
Well, part of the question is what the legal grounds are for refusing to cooperate at all. What presidential administrations have done in the past, and the Trump administration has done on occasions as well, is lean on executive privilege in order to argue that very specific documents or very specific information has to be kept confidential within the executive branch and can't be shared with Congress. What's striking about the administration's current position is it doesn't make those kinds of very specific claims. Instead, it's making a very blanket claim that we're just not going to cooperate at all.
And with that lack of precedent, Trump's critics are wondering just how powerful subpoenas really are.
Because he treats subpoenas like parking tickets.
Congress does have a few options, though they're rarely used: criminal contempt, civil enforcement, and inherent contempt. First up, criminal contempt.
They can hold the relevant executive branch official in contempt of Congress for not complying with the subpoena, which means in part that they can then refer that to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution. In practice, the Justice Department will not actually prosecute those cases.
That's what happened when the House held Attorney General William Barr and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in criminal contempt of Congress. In doing so, the House voted to ask the Justice Department to prosecute the two of them for ignoring their subpoenas. But of course, the Trump administration's Department of Justice wasn't exactly going to prosecute its own Attorney General. The only other time in U.S. history that this has happened to a sitting cabinet member was in 2012, when a Republican House held then Attorney General Eric Holder in criminal contempt of Congress. Both of these examples show that going the criminal contempt route might not be the best option. Congress could also go the civil route, essentially asking the courts to order the witness to hand over the documents.
They can try to take those rejections of subpoenas to courts and try to get a court order.
But civil enforcement can take forever. So the third option for Congress is inherent contempt. Congress has rarely used it in the past, but they have the power to imprison or fine non-compliant witnesses on their own.
It's been since the 1920s since Congress actually used the Sergeant of Arms to go and arrest someone. That theoretically is possible, right? The House of Representatives could send its Sergeant at Arms to go enforce a contempt citation. I think that's unlikely to happen. It hasn't been done, as I said, in almost 100 years.
What is the calculation being made by Trump administration officials when they decide to ignore a subpoena?
I think the White House has clearly decided that they're going to be, the president is going to be impeached in any case. He's assuming impeachment is going to occur, and so now he's looking further down the road and focusing his attention on the Senate trial and ultimately to the presidential election campaign. If you're convinced they're going to impeach you no matter what, it really does encourage the White House to just be non-cooperative.
But there is one more thing Congress could do. Less of a legal option and more of a political tactic. Basically, they tried to use their leverage to derail President Trump's legislative agenda.
In the Trump administration's case, it's not clear that they have a legislative agenda. It's not clear then that they have very much that they expect to get out of Congress.
It's worth remembering, ignoring all of these subpoenas could backfire for the Trump administration, because that resistance could be grounds for impeachment in and of itself.
The House might simply say that if you're hiding the evidence of what we think might be an impeachable offense, it's in your interest to reveal that evidence if you think, in fact, it will exonerate you. And if you're going to continue hiding it, then we should regard that as itself impeachable and abuse of power.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.